And okay, we conclude today, chapter 15. Chapter 15, and one word is oived, to serve. What does it mean really to serve? What does it really mean to serve? Well, we started yesterday. If you have a nature and you follow that nature, then you're not serving God. It's self-serving in a way. Even though it might be that your nature is like to do good and just to follow and never have it. If you don't have a struggle, you're not serving. Serving means there is a struggle. That is the bottom line. But this, the Alter Rebbe says, we can understand what it means, the Talmudic statement, that back in the day, Talmudic times, they studied the oral Torah, which was not written down. Before it was written down, now we have it in writing. Tanya is in writing, the Talmud is in writing, but there was a time that the oral tradition was only oral. And so back in the day, they would study each of the teachings of the Mishnah, by way of example, 100 times. You'll study it 100 times, boy, are you going to know it well. You're not going to forget it. But that's, the Talmud says, it's not someone who serves. Why? Because that's the way what everybody did. So that was sort of like the students back in the day. That was the culture. That was the way. But if you did 101 times, that's called a servant. That's called serving. It gives the Talmud illustrates this by analogy. The analogy is that if you go to market and you want to rent a donkey to go to travel and take goods from one place to another, well, for one zuz you could go 10 parsa. One zuz, let's say, for $10 you could go 10 miles. Parsa is a Persian mile. So you could go 10 miles. If you wanted to go an 11th mile, you had to pay 2 zuz, double. Why? Because the donkeys back in the day, for this illustration at least, their natural capability was 10 parsa, 10 miles. To go the 11th, that was driving them above and beyond, and therefore you had to pay double. That is the metaphor that's used to understand the idea. This idea that what is it called to serve God? That you go beyond the box. We all live in a box. We all have a nature. We all have a nature that's been nurtured, that leads us to do things instinctually. It can be wonderful, good things. We're not talking about anything bad here. Only good. But when it becomes a habitual nature that is compelling you, then you're not serving God. When, though, you have a love of God, because you've contemplated the greatness of God, you understand God in your life, you understand God through creation, you understand God, what he needs and wants from you, and you contemplate that, and that leads you to a feeling of love towards God that allows you to master over your habitual way that could be, again, positive, good things, but now you overpower that animal soul. That's called an avodah tama, a perfect service of the Beinoni. Why? Because they're not doing things out of habit. Again, good habits, we all have good habits, but if we just do it out of habit, then that's not called serving. Perfect service is when you intellectually arouse your emotions to a love and awe of God because you contemplate the greatness of God. That will bring you to perfect service. And an imperfect service, but yet service, meaning that you're rising above and beyond your natural tendency, is that when you are aroused by your natural hidden love, which we're going to learn more about in chapters 18 and 19 and thereafter, that hidden love that's in the soul, that arouses us to do things that are above and beyond what we're habitually comfortable with, shall we say. That's called waging a war. You're waging a war. What's the war? Habit. Habit is the war. That's called serving, when you don't follow your natural habit. Ultimately, Judaism is like an infinite ladder. Where you stand that ladder is insignificant. You're on top of the ladder. That's an infinite ladder, so it can be top, but a higher point, a lower point, doesn't matter. Which direction are you going? And what does it mean to go in a direction upwards rather than downwards? Well, when you do things habitually, so then you're not really moving upwards and you can't stand stationary. You're moving ultimately downwards. But when you wage the battle of habit, again, we're talking about the Bainani over here. So we're not talking about bad habits. I'm not talking get rid of your bad habits. That long time ago, we all need to get rid of our bad habits. We're talking about good habits here. But being that it's habitual, it's not serving God. It's self-serving because you're just following the dictates of your habit. Again, your habit is to learn Tanya every day, perhaps, right? It becomes habitual. That's not called serving. But when we're mindful before we learn Tanya, before we pray, before we do any mitzvah, and we're mindful about our connection to God through this, and that leads us to a feeling in our heart of love. Wow, that's a perfect service. Because now you're motivated by that love of God as opposed to your habit, and therefore you have gone to the 101st level rather than the 100th, which is living in your box. Back in the day, again, they learned the oral tradition 100 times, so that was living in their box, so to speak, in their comfort zone, and to rise above that. Now, someone who does not wage war at all, right, and still studies, but only to the limits of their natural diligence, their natural comfort, that's not a service of God at all. It can't be credited to their service, and this is called someone who serves him not. Beautiful teachings. I'd like to take apart the analogy for a moment. What's the analogy? Of renting donkeys to go 10 parsa, 10 miles, right? So an analogy in Torah comes from the analog. As it's not merely analogy, but it itself truly expresses it in the details, and therefore it really comes from the analog, develops the analogy. Why is it a donkey? The word donkey in Hebrew is chamor. Chamor means materiality. It's the materiality of the person, and it's not, you don't own the donkey. First of all, that donkey is a materiality, is that we need to work with our materiality. But this is speaking about a Bainani. A Bainani doesn't own his materiality, doesn't own his materiality, meaning that he's totally in control of it. All he's doing is renting. He doesn't own it. A tzaddik owns it. A tzaddik has complete mastery over the material world, their material world. They master it totally, and therefore they have ownership. The Bainani is only renting, because all it can do is not transform the inner world of emotions and intellect and perspective that comes from the intellect, and therefore doesn't have complete mastery over self, over the materiality of the person, or over the world of the person's world. But what they can do is iskafia, they can bend it and not allow it to have self-expression in thought, speech, and action, as we have learned till now. In any case, the bottom line that we've learned over here is, if we think of our relationship with God as an infinite ladder, and whatever we climb the ladder, meaning we're going beyond our comfort zone, we're going beyond what our natural diligence is in learning Torah, we're going beyond what our natural comfort is in giving charity, we're going beyond the natural comfort of doing a mitzvah and being there for another, or whatever mitzvah it is, then that's called service of God. If we're doing it because we do it through an understanding that leads to a love, then that's a perfect service. If we do it out of the accessing natural love that we have in our soul, that love. So it is divine service. If we don't wage any war, if we don't have any challenge, and we don't give, and we not that we get, we just follow what is natural and instinctual. Again, good, because we're talking about the Beinoni over here. So his complete behavior is impeccable in thought, speech, and action. Yet, if it's natural, so then if it's instinctual, if it's living within the box, so then that's not called serving God. Powerful idea. Any questions, any comments? Folks, I mentioned at the beginning, I say again, I'm started now a 1-minute Tanya inspiration on my personal Instagram and my personal LinkedIn. You can go to, it's called Tanya Rabbi, in both places that you can access it there. More good stuff. I guess that's my gift for you. One of my gifts for Chap for the 70 years of the Rebbe's leadership, and also in keeping with what we're learning here, going above and beyond, and not allowing the living in the box in the comfort zone. I've been doing Tanya like this for a long time. It's been comfortable. And enjoyable and wonderful. Got to go above and beyond. Flavia from Brazil, shalom. Jeffrey from Toronto, welcome. Erica from Norway, hello. Ahmed, shalom. Linda from Nebraska, good morning. Andrew from New Jersey, thank you for joining. Marjorie from Dania Beach, Florida. And Robert from Boston. We have Sharon, thank you for sharing. Hani from the UK. Sharon from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the Caribbean. Okay, I'm sorry, can't. Instagrammers, let me know your names and where you're from. That's amazing. From Brazil, Florence. Okay. All right, folks. Sharing is caring. Please share this with your friends. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you with Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you, Tanya. Have a wonderful day.